At 88 years old, I never imagined I'd be standing here today, literally and figuratively. Just 3 years ago, my life took a drastic turn when I slipped on an icy sidewalk during one of my morning walks. The fall left me bedridden for months, unable to even lift a cup of tea without assistance. That accident wasn't just physical, it shattered something deeper within me, my sense of independence. For someone who prided herself on being self-reliant, this felt like losing a part of my soul. But that experience taught me the first lesson in thriving after 80. Taking care of your body is not merely about health. It's about holding on to your dignity and freedom. Every day since then has been a battle against time, gravity, and my own doubts. I started with small victories, wiggling my toes, sitting up straight, and eventually walking again with the help of a cane. Each step forward felt monumental, as though I was reclaiming pieces of myself I thought were lost forever. It wasn't easy. There were nights filled with frustration, days where pain seemed insurmountable, and moments when I questioned whether all this effort was worth it. But every victory, no matter how minor, reminded me why it mattered, because each movement brought me closer to living life on my terms. But caring for the body isn't enough if the mind begins to falter. Imagine waking up one morning only to realize you've forgotten the name of the street you've lived on for decades. That fear haunted me until I decided to fight back. I turned puzzles into my best friends, books into my escape, and daily meditation into my sanctuary. My husband jokes that I now solve crosswords faster than he can read them. But behind those laughs lies the truth. We must keep our minds sharp or risk losing ourselves entirely. And speaking of my husband, Clifford, our love story hasn't always been smooth sailing. After nearly 6 decades together, we've had our share of storms. One particularly dark night stands out. A heated argument over finances spiraled so badly that I considered sleeping in the guest room. Yet, through tears and apologies, we found laughter again. Love at this age isn't perfect, but it's resilient. We've learned to cherish every shared cup of coffee, every quiet moment watching sunsets, and yes, even those silly arguments that remind us we're still alive. At 88, I never thought I'd be fighting this hard to simply stay on my feet, literally and figuratively. Just 3 years ago, the icy sidewalk that sent me crashing to the ground wasn't just a physical blow, it was an emotional earthquake. The fall left me bedridden for months, unable to lift even a cup of tea without help. Overnight, I went from being fiercely independent to feeling like a burden, relying on others for everything. That experience taught me something raw and unforgettable. Taking care of your body isn't just about health, it's about holding on to your dignity, your freedom, and your sense of self-worth. But regaining my independence didn't happen overnight. Every step forward felt monumental, and every setback felt catastrophic. There were mornings when I could barely sit up in bed, let alone walk across the room. My husband Clifford stood by me through it all, but even his patience wore thin at times. "You have to try harder," he said once, frustration creeping into his voice as I struggled to stand during one particularly grueling therapy session. His words stung, not because they weren't true, but because deep down I feared he might be right, that maybe I'd never get back what I had lost. Yet with each small victory, a wiggled toe, a tentative shuffle across the floor, I began to claw my way back to life. Exercise became my lifeline, though it wasn't easy. At first, even lifting light weights felt impossible, But I soon realized that every movement mattered. Each stretch, each step was a battle against time itself, a fight to preserve not only my mobility, but also my sanity. Walking became more than exercise. It became a symbol of defiance against aging. Some days I would push myself too far, collapsing into tears after overexerting my still healing muscles. Other days I celebrated tiny triumphs like walking 10 steps without clutching the railing. These moments reminded me why I was fighting so hard, to reclaim the autonomy I cherished. Nutrition played its part too. After years of eating whatever I pleased, I now approached meals with military precision. Fish rich in omega-3s, vibrant vegetables bursting with antioxidants, whole grains packed with energy, all became staples of my diet. I learned the hard way how much food impacts both body and mind. One afternoon, after indulging in a sugary snack, I found myself struggling to focus on a crossword puzzle I'd been enjoying. It hit me then. Nourishing my body wasn't just about staying strong physically, it was about keeping my mind sharp enough to tackle challenges head on. Yet caring for my body meant more than fueling it or moving it. It meant tending to my emotions. Stress weighed heavily on me during those early recovery days. Simple tasks like brushing my teeth or tying my shoes triggered waves of anxiety. What if I fell again? What if I couldn't do it? Meditation became my refuge. Sitting quietly, focusing on my breath, I slowly learned to quiet the storm inside me. Clifford noticed the change. "You seem calmer," he remarked one evening as we watched the sunset together. His observation brought tears to my eyes, not out of sadness, but relief. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. A sleepless night spent worrying about the future. A sudden pang of guilt when I saw Clifford juggling caregiving duties with his own needs. Those nights were dark, but they also reinforced my resolve. If I gave up, who would suffer most? Not just me, but everyone around me. My journey wasn't just personal, it was relational. Every ounce of strength I regained allowed me to contribute more to our shared life, easing the weight Clifford carried and strengthening the bond between us. Looking back, I realized that caring for my body wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving. Each meal, each workout, each moment of mindfulness built a foundation for living fully. When I finally walked unaided again, tears streaming down my face, I knew I hadn't just reclaimed my independence. I had rediscovered my resilience, my purpose, and my joy. And in doing so, I proved to myself and to Clifford that no obstacle is insurmountable when you're determined to live well. At 88, the fear of losing my mind became almost as paralyzing as the physical limitations I had already faced. One morning, while trying to recall the name of a street I'd lived on for decades, panic set in. What if this was the beginning of something worse? The thought of slipping into confusion, unable to recognize Clifford or remember our shared memories, terrified me more than anything else. I realized then that maintaining mental clarity wasn't just about preserving independence. It was about holding on to who I truly was. This realization sparked a fierce determination within me. I would fight tooth and nail to keep my mind sharp. The first step was simple yet profound, engaging my brain daily with activities that challenged it. Puzzles, books, and even learning new skills became my weapons against cognitive decline. Every crossword puzzle I solved felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. There were days when frustration mounted. Entire afternoons passed without solving a single clue, leaving me exhausted and disheartened. But each small victory, the moment a word finally clicked into place, was exhilarating. Clifford noticed my growing obsession and teased me relentlessly. "You're becoming faster at these puzzles than I am," he joked one evening. Beneath his laughter, though, lay an unspoken truth. Keeping my mind active wasn't optional, it was survival. Exercise also played a crucial role, though not always in ways I expected. Initially, I viewed walking as purely physical therapy, a means to regain mobility, but soon discovered its impact on my mental clarity. After a brisk walk around the neighborhood, I found myself thinking more clearly, ideas flowing effortlessly. It wasn't magic, it was science. Increased blood flow delivered oxygen to my brain, sharpening my focus and easing the foggy haze that sometimes clouded my thoughts. Even gentle stretches in the morning became sacred rituals, moments where I could feel life pulsing through me again. Yet there were setbacks. Some days overexertion left me dizzy and breathless, forcing me to confront the delicate balance between pushing myself and respecting my limits. Each stumble reminded me how fragile and resilient the human body truly is. Nutrition proved equally vital. Switching to a diet rich in omega-3s and antioxidants initially felt daunting. Fish replaced comfort foods, vegetables crowded my plate, and sugary snacks disappeared entirely. At first, I resented the change, craving the indulgences of my youth, but the results spoke for themselves. On mornings when I skipped breakfast or indulged in something unhealthy, I noticed a marked difference in my ability to concentrate. A sugary pastry once led to hours of mental sluggishness, making even basic tasks feel insurmountable. From then on, I approached meals with military precision, knowing that what I put into my body directly fueled my mind. Managing stress required a different kind of discipline. Meditation became my lifeline during those dark nights when anxiety threatened to consume me. Sitting quietly, focusing on my breath, I slowly learned to quiet the storm inside. Clifford often joined me, our silence speaking volumes about the bond we shared. Yet some evenings, stress still crept in. Worrying about finances, health, or the future weighed heavily on both of us. Those nights tested our patience and resilience, but they also deepened our connection. We learned to lean on each other, finding solace in shared vulnerability. Social interaction completed the puzzle. As much as I cherished solitude, isolation began to take its toll. Conversations with friends and family reignited parts of me I hadn't realized were dimming. Sharing stories, laughing over old memories, and even debating trivial matters brought vibrancy back into my life. Clifford and I made it a point to host weekly gatherings, inviting neighbors and relatives to join us. These interactions weren't just pleasant distractions, they were lifelines, reminding me that I was still part of a larger world. Looking back, I see now that maintaining mental clarity wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. Each book read, each walk taken, each meal prepared with care built a foundation for living fully. When I finally completed a particularly challenging puzzle, tears streaming down my face, I knew I hadn't just preserved my intellect. I had reclaimed my identity, my purpose, and my joy. At 88, I never imagined my marriage to Clifford would still be thriving after so many decades together. Yet here we are, two souls weathered by time but bound closer than ever. Our journey hasn't always been smooth. In fact, there were moments that tested the very foundation of our love. One night stands out vividly. A heated argument over finances spiraled into something far darker. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered through tears, clutching the doorknob of the guest room, ready to sleep alone for the first time in years. The air felt heavy with regret and frustration. But even in that darkest hour, something inside us refused to let go. We sat down, talked it through, and laughed at how ridiculous it all seemed afterward. That moment taught me an invaluable lesson. Respect isn't just about agreeing, it's about truly understanding each other. As we age, patience becomes both a virtue and a necessity. There have been mornings when Clifford forgets where he left his glasses or misplaces keys yet again. Initially, irritation bubbled up within me. Why couldn't he remember? But then I remembered how often I'd snapped at him during those early recovery days after my fall. He had stood by me without complaint, even when I was at my most difficult. So instead of criticism, I chose empathy. Let me help you find them, I said softly one morning, handing him his misplaced item with a smile. His grateful expression reminded me why we've stayed together all these years. Mutual respect keeps love alive. Cherishing time together has also taken on new meaning as the years pass. Simple acts, sharing tea in the garden, taking leisurely walks around the block, watching old movies side by side, have become sacred rituals. Once, while strolling under the autumn leaves, Clifford suddenly stopped and pointed to a tree. "Remember that picnic we had here?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. Of course I did. The memory flooded back, warm and vivid. These shared moments aren't just nostalgia. They're reminders of the life we built together. They anchor us, grounding our bond amidst life's inevitable storms. Humor remains our lifeline, especially when challenges arise. When health scares loomed large, a routine checkup revealing elevated blood pressure or another doctor warning about cholesterol, Clifford turned worry into laughter. "Well," he joked one evening, "if they tell me to stop eating dessert, I'll start hiding cookies under my pillow." His lightheartedness diffused tension, reminding us both not to take life too seriously. Laughter doesn't erase problems, but it softens their edges, making them easier to bear. Forgiveness, however, might be the cornerstone of our enduring partnership. Over the years, misunderstandings piled up, words spoken in anger, promises forgotten, frustrations simmering beneath the surface. One particularly painful incident involved Clifford missing an important family gathering because he misunderstood the date. Hurt flared instantly, but instead of holding on to resentment, I chose to forgive. Sitting across from him later that evening, I realized forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. It clears space for love to flourish again, mending cracks before they widen into chasms. Looking back now, I see how interconnected everything is. Caring for my body gave me the energy to nurture our relationship. Maintaining mental clarity allowed me to approach conflicts with calmness, and cherishing Clifford ensured that love remained at the heart of my life. Together, we faced aging, not as adversaries, but as allies. Each small act of kindness, each shared laugh, each moment of forgiveness has fortified our bond. At 88, I know now that happiness in marriage isn't about perfection. It's about grace, gratitude, and growing together despite imperfections. At 8, I've come to realize that the secrets we keep as parents are just as important as the lessons we teach. These unspoken truths, though often buried deep within us, shape the emotional landscape of our families in ways we may not immediately understand. Clifford and I have had our share of struggles, moments when frustration bubbled over, or doubts clouded our hearts. But through it all, we made a silent pact to shield our children from certain burdens. It wasn't always easy, but these choices became the foundation of a harmonious family life. One of the hardest lessons I learned was to never blame my ancestors, or even Clifford's, for the challenges we faced. Early on, there were times when bitterness crept in. If only your grandfather hadn't gambled away the inheritance, I once muttered under my breath during a particularly difficult financial stretch. The words slipped out before I could stop them. And though no one responded, I saw the flicker of confusion in my son's eyes. That moment haunted me for weeks. What if he started blaming his circumstances on things beyond his control? The weight of responsibility hit me like a ton of bricks. From then on, I vowed to speak with gratitude instead of resentment, focusing on how far we'd come rather than what we lacked. Equally challenging was resisting the urge to vent about Clifford in front of the kids. There were nights after heated arguments when I wanted to scream, "Your father doesn't understand anything," but I bit my tongue every time, knowing the damage such words could inflict. Once, during a tense dinner, my daughter asked why I looked so upset. Instead of lashing out, I forced a smile and said, "Sometimes grown-ups disagree, but we always work things out because we love each other." Her relieved expression reminded me why holding back mattered. It preserved their sense of security, their belief in love as something steadfast and unwavering. Then came the temptation to compare my children, a trap I nearly fell into more times than I care to admit. When my eldest excelled academically while my youngest struggled, I found myself thinking, why can't you try harder? But the day those words almost escaped my lips, I caught myself. My youngest was already withdrawn, spending hours alone in his room. I realized then that comparing them wouldn't push him to succeed, it would only break his spirit further. Instead, I began celebrating his unique talents, his creativity, his kindness, and watched as he slowly regained confidence. Those small affirmations became lifelines, pulling him back from the brink of self-doubt. Finally, there was the challenge of shielding them from negativity about life itself. Living through wars, economic downturns, and personal hardships, it was tempting to voice despair. "This world is falling apart," I once whispered to Clifford late at night, unaware that our youngest had overheard. The next morning, he hesitated before leaving for school, asking, "Is it safe out there?" His fear shook me awake. From that day forward, I chose my words carefully, framing difficulties as opportunities for growth rather than insurmountable obstacles. Looking back now, I see how these secrets, these deliberate silences, protected not just our children, but our entire family. They allowed us to build a home filled with trust, resilience, and hope. Even at 88, I still believe that the unspoken carries as much power as the spoken. By guarding these truths, we gave our children the gift of peace, a legacy worth far more than any material wealth. At 88, I've come to realize that the choices we make as parents ripple far beyond our own lives. They shape the very fabric of who our children become. Clifford and I have had our share of missteps over the decades, moments when frustration clouded our judgment or pride got in the way. But through it all, one truth has remained constant. How we speak about the past, each other, and our children shapes their future more than we can ever imagine. When I think back on my own childhood, memories of my father's sacrifices often bring tears to my eyes. Yet for years I was tempted to blame him for the hardships we endured. Why didn't he work harder? Why couldn't he provide more? It wasn't until I became a parent myself that I understood the weight of his efforts. Now, sitting across from my grandchildren, I tell them stories not of lack, but of gratitude. Your great-grandfather gave us everything he could, I say, my voice steady with conviction. He taught me resilience. These words aren't just for them, they're for me too. Reminders to honor those who came before us. Speaking of Clifford with respect has been equally transformative. There were nights after heated arguments when bitterness threatened to spill into conversations with our kids. Once, during a particularly dark moment, I found myself saying, "If only I hadn't married your father." The guilt hit instantly, not because Clifford heard it, but because of the confusion in my son's eyes. That night changed something in me. From then on, even in disagreement, I vowed to highlight his strengths alongside his flaws. Yes, your father can be stubborn, I'd admit, but his determination built this family. Those balanced perspectives became bridges, teaching our children that love isn't perfect, it's enduring. Recognizing each child's uniqueness wasn't always easy. My eldest once asked why her brother received more praise. Her question stung, forcing me to confront my biases. Instead of brushing it off, I apologized and promised to celebrate her gifts openly. You see beauty where others don't, I told her later, framing her creativity as invaluable. Watching her face light up reminded me how powerful validation can be. It doesn't just affirm, it transforms. Finally, maintaining positivity in life's chaos felt like an uphill battle. When health scares loomed or finances tightened, despair whispered loudly. But I learned to reframe struggles. Yes, it's hard now, but look how far we've come. Those reframed narratives became lifelines, instilling hope in both me and my family. Looking back, these lessons weren't just advice. They were lifelines keeping us connected, thriving despite imperfections. At 88, I've come to realize that life isn't measured by the years we live, but by the moments we cherish. Each sunrise feels like a gift now, a fleeting treasure I once took for granted. After my fall 3 years ago, there were nights when despair crept in, whispering that perhaps it was time to let go. But Clifford's unwavering presence and our shared laughter pulled me back from the brink. Those small, joyful interactions became lifelines, reminding me how precious every day truly is. Gratitude has become my anchor. Even on days when pain lingers or memories falter, I find something to be thankful for. The warmth of sunlight streaming through the window, the sound of Clifford's voice as he reads aloud, or the laughter of grandchildren echoing through the house. These moments aren't just happiness, they're defiance against the weight of aging. They remind me that joy isn't something we wait for, it's something we create. Family remains at the heart of everything. When I look at my children and grandchildren, I see not just their smiles, but the legacy Clifford and I have built, a tapestry woven with love, forgiveness, and resilience. Yet this legacy isn't guaranteed. It requires nurturing. There were times when misunderstandings threatened to unravel bonds, but choosing kindness over anger kept us connected. Every act of care, no matter how small, plants seeds of love that will bloom long after we're gone. Leaving behind a legacy isn't about grand gestures. It's about the quiet, consistent acts of love that shape future generations. As I sit here writing this, I think of my great-grandchildren who may one day read these words. Will they feel the depth of love I tried to convey? Will they understand that life's true beauty lies in gratitude, joy, and connection? At 88, I can say with certainty, live fully, love deeply, and leave a trail of kindness behind you. That is the greatest gift of all.